of urgency in resolving that?
No, I mean, it's real talk, and it's accountability. That's what I told him. I go, there's selfishness in this locker room. There is. And, you know, you gotta look in the mirror and be accountable on how you played. And don't get upset if you think...
Are there any precautions or concerns about where she's at right now, personally or health-wise? No, he said. Honestly, I'm looking forward to her being the first guard off the bench tonight. We want to make sure we find her in transition and run some half-court sets to get her the basketball, and we'll see how she feels once the game gets going. Pay close attention to that phrasing, first guard off the bench. That's the kind of language a coach uses when he's trying to manage expectations before the pressure starts building. Paige Bueckers' former UConn teammate, Azzi Fudd, the #1 overall pick in the 2025 WNBA draft, is coming off the bench in Dallas, and even before the press conference started, members of her inner circle had already taken to social media to complain about her role.
Or concerns for where she's at, percentage-wise, health-wise?
No, I mean, I'm looking forward to her being the first guard off the bench tonight, you know, and again, making sure we find her in transition and running some half-court options for her to get the basketball, and we'll see how she feels, you know.
Look in the mirror and be accountable. Don't get upset if you didn't play enough. That was a public message aimed at a private problem. Mick Talks Hoops first reported that people connected to Azzi Fudd had been airing frustrations online about her bench role and limited shot attempts. Hours later, Coach Fernandez stood at the podium and appeared to respond to those complaints directly, without ever mentioning anyone by name.
Or you didn't play enough, or you didn't get the shots that you think you should have gotten. Really good teams, they don't give a shit about that. You know what they give a shit about? They give a shit about winning. Because that's what matters.
Now, many people are saying this is
Championship teams don't care who starts. They don't care how many minutes they play, and they don't care if the ball isn't going in for them. They find other ways to contribute, especially on the defensive end. Once we start doing that, and stop getting caught up in our feelings, because body language never whispers, things will change. That message sounded direct, and the translation was obvious. Someone in that locker room clearly cares about all three of those things, and the head coach seems frustrated by it. Odyssey Sims played 20 minutes in the game and scored 8 points, while Olivia Miles, the rookie many analysts ranked above Azzi Fudd on pre-draft boards, has statistically outperformed her since opening night. That comparison has now become the elephant in the room at nearly every Dallas Wings press conference.
But people can't be concerned. Really good teams and championship teams, they don't care who starts. They don't care how many minutes they play. They don't care if the ball's not going in for them. They can do different things on the defensive end. When we start doing that, and we don't get in our feelings, because body language
never whispers. Remember that line, because it reveals a lot about what Fernandez has been noticing behind the scenes, watching reactions on the bench, seeing shoulders slump after substitutions, and paying attention to who celebrates for teammates and who stays silent. When a coach specifically brings up body language in a post-game press conference, he's not speaking in general terms or hypotheticals. He saw something specific, and the message was clearly directed at someone.
Championship teams, you play for the guy next to you. And it doesn't matter if the ball's not going in. You can do so many other things. You can defend, you can share it, you can go get stuff off the glass. When that changes, then you don't lose these type of games.
This was the most revealing stretch of the entire press conference. Listen carefully to what he's really saying beneath the basketball talk. It was all fun when we were scoring 90 or 100 points. Everybody was having a good time. Now it's a lot different. He's describing a team that embraced winning when everything felt easy, but started to fracture the moment adversity showed up. That's not just a basketball problem, that's a culture problem. And in the WNBA, where rosters are only 11 or 12 players deep and chemistry can shape an entire season, culture issues can spiral quickly. The Wings traded Satu Sabali in the offseason, built the roster around Paige Bueckers as the franchise centerpiece, and drafted Azzi Fudd #1 overall with the belief that the team could compete immediately. That was the bet ownership made, the front office backed, and now that very decision appears to be under public scrutiny from the head coach who's responsible for making it all work.
Well, we got to continue. Guess what? You know, doesn't matter how much I score, doesn't matter how much I play, you know. if this thing's gonna change, right? It's got to change first in everything that we do, right? It was all fun and it's all excited. We're scoring 90, 100 points. Everybody's having a good time. Everybody's playing. Now it's a lot different, right? You got to get through adversity if you're not playing well yourself on the other things that you need to do. But we were up 9 against Indiana also on the road, and it was the same thing at halftime. But I saw it changing in the middle of that fourth.
The film's not going to lie. The film's going to convict. That wording was intentional. Fernandez wasn't simply saying the team would review game tape. He was signaling that the film room was about to feel like a courtroom, with effort and accountability on trial. When veteran coaches start using legal metaphors like that, it usually means they're preparing for confrontation, and the people being convicted are sitting right there in the locker room watching it unfold. What should concern Dallas fans most is that Fernandez isn't some inexperienced coach learning how to handle pressure. After spending more than 2 decades as the head coach at the University of South Florida before taking over the Wings job, he deliberately chose this public approach. And when a veteran coach takes criticism public, it often means he believes the private conversations have already failed.
Coaches accuse, right? And even players accuse, but the film's going to convict our effort. Did we get over ball screens? Did we rotate? Did we cover backside block? What was our effort? So, and then they got to look at themselves and hold each other accountable in the film room and in the locker room. And when that happens, you have a great locker room. And then things change.
Coach, earlier you were talking about some of the good things that Maddie was doing. I know you just talked about the minutes and stuff like that. But what went behind the decision to not play her in most of the fourth when you needed some of those baskets, and she was doing that when she was on the court?
She did, but you know what? We came out of halftime and pick and roll coverage, and we gave up 2 threes. So that's what happened there.
So that was the coaching this.
Yeah, it wasn't the issue. Wasn't getting more. We don't have a problem scoring.
And this is where he finally gets specific about Maddie Siegrist. She scored 17 points in the first half, yet spent most of the fourth quarter on the bench. Reporters in the room pressed Fernandez about his rotation decisions, and he defended them by pointing to defensive coverages, pick-and-roll breakdowns, and a pair of three-pointers the opponent hit coming out of halftime. But the real story was unfolding within that exchange itself. Multiple reporters in a single press conference were openly questioning his minute distribution. That's not normal. That's a media room sensing dysfunction, and pushing hard to uncover it.
That's why we challenged that call. I thought it was clean up top, right? But apparently they disagreed and said there was lower body contact.
Do you feel like you could have used her defense at the end with Olivia?
No, I mean, Isaiah James is a good defender. Odyssey Sims is a good defender.
Coach, how much of the little mistakes do you chalk up to, a little bit of the chemistry still developing, the communication still developing, and, playing with each other still developing early in the season?
Those are both, we can chalk it up to that, but I think those are excuses. Bottom line is, you got to
watch how carefully Fernandez answers this question. Has she played 19 or 20 minutes for someone who hasn't practiced? We're easing her into becoming a bigger part of the rotation and giving her more minutes. He defends her effort on defense, praises her overall game, and then, in the very next breath, admits she was pulled during a critical stretch because the team wanted a different defender on the floor. So which is it? Is she a foundational piece the organization is slowly building around, or is she a player the coaching staff still doesn't fully trust in clutch moments? Technically, both things can be true, but publicly, a team usually has to choose one message. Fernandez allowed both narratives to exist in the same answer, and that's what made the moment so revealing. Here's why this story is bigger than one rough night in Dallas. Azzi Fudd was selected first overall in the 2025 WNBA draft, and from the second that pick was announced, many around the basketball world questioned it. The logic behind the selection seemed obvious. Paige Bueckers was already the centerpiece in Dallas, and the 2 former UConn teammates had championship chemistry together. Pairing them was supposed to accelerate the franchise timeline, skip the rebuilding phase, and push the team into immediate contention. The problem is that Olivia Miles, drafted later, has looked like the stronger professional rookie so far, and the statistical gap between the two has only fueled criticism that Fudd's selection had more to do with her connection to Bueckers than pure basketball value. That pressure forms the backdrop for everything Fernandez said in this press conference. When he talks about selfishness, accountability, body language, and frustration over minutes, he's speaking from inside that storm. Reports of people in Fudd's circle taking their frustrations to social media are significant because, in a league with limited roster spots and standardized rookie deals, public complaints are often viewed as an attempt to shift blame away from the player and toward the coaching staff. Fernandez recognized that immediately, and his press conference felt like a direct rejection of that narrative. He never mentioned Fudd by name, but everyone inside the organization likely understood exactly who the message was aimed at. Now consider the pressure this creates for Paige Bueckers. She's the face of the franchise, but she's also Fudd's closest basketball friend. If frustrations from Fudd's camp continue spilling into public view, Bueckers could eventually be forced into an impossible position: stay silent and appear to side with the coach, or defend Fudd and risk undermining the head coach publicly. Either path creates tension for a second-year star who should be focused on developing her own game. Meanwhile, Maddie Siegrist becomes another casualty of the situation. She scored 17 points in the first half, did her job offensively, and still watched most of the closing minutes from the bench. Whether the defensive reasoning was justified or not, repeated decisions like that can slowly erode trust between player and coach, especially for a third-year player still trying to establish a permanent role in the league. The most revealing thing Fernandez said wasn't about selfishness or accountability. It was this: it was all fun when we were scoring 90 or 100 points. That line sounded like an admission that this roster still hasn't learned how to handle adversity together, and teams that can't lose together early in the season rarely figure it out by playoff time. Now the Dallas Wings organization faces a difficult decision. Either ownership and the front office publicly back the coach, which likely means tolerating uncomfortable media moments and an unhappy number 1 overall pick, or they protect the player they built the franchise around, which risks sending the message that public complaints can influence organizational decisions. There isn't really a clean middle ground. A franchise that publicly supports Fernandez might still have a chance to stabilize the locker room. A franchise that responds with vague statements about evolving roles and ongoing conversations risks signaling that the room is already slipping away. So the real question becomes this: if you're running the Dallas Wings tonight, do you back the coach who publicly challenged your top draft pick, or do you protect the rookie you invested the future of the franchise in just weeks ago? Because eventually, the organization may have to choose a side.